Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Shelby County Board of Education's January 23rd, 2018 work session. Ms. Anthony, please call the roll.
Board Member Caldwell,
Here.
Board Member Orgel, Board Member Woods, Board Member Love, Board Member McCormick, Board Member Jones, Board Member Bibbs, Board Member Cornell,
Here.
Board Chair Avant.
Here.
You have 5 present.
Thank you. Well, we now have a quorum. We're going to move forward with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please stand. Also remain standing during the moment of silence. Please remember to keep in your thoughts and prayers the families of the following individuals who have passed away: Richard Jordan, Alton Elementary; Gabrielle Harris, Whitehaven High School; Portia Thomas, a faculty member at Scenic Hills Elementary School; Lauren McCoy, a teacher at Cordova Elementary. And we also like to keep the students and faculty at the high schools in Kentucky and Texas who have been impacted in our thoughts and our prayers. Thank you.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. The question is now on the approval of the agenda. Oh. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Superintendent, if there are no amendments to the agenda, then we are going to move forward. No amendments. We are now ready for a vote, Ms. Anthony.
Board Member Caldwell,
Yes.
Board Member Orgel, Board Member Woods, Board Member Love, Board Member McCormick, Board Member Jones, Board Member Bibbs, Board Member Cornell,
Aye.
Board Chair Avant.
Yes,
You have 5 ayes.
we have a quorum. The agenda is approved. Under my report tonight, I would like to take a few moments just to acknowledge some of the great things that have been going on in our district. I do want to commend the district and its employees and how they handled what was not planned, but a actual week out of school for snow and ice. And I think it was always important for us to keep the safety of our children, our employees at the forefront of our mind. But I do want to commend the district and whomever is running our Twitter account. They have really kept it very live over the holiday for this winter break. I'm just going to say that. I mean, they've done a great job of keeping us both entertained, but definitely keep us informed. I know my daughter, who follows the superintendent on Twitter and SCS, kept me informed of when the school was going to be open and closed. So I do appreciate for the communications team who did a really good job. I'd also like to take a moment to thank one of our teachers at Raleigh Egypt High School, who took time to actually teach a class while we were out for the school closings. She was teaching her science class, I believe. She was talking about genetics. And I got a chance to see her on Facebook Live, making sure that our students who asked for us to be able to teach while they were out on the weather, for the inclement weather, to still be able to have some learning. And so I appreciate Candace Brown. And that story was also covered on CNN for her being able to share and being very creative for our students during that time. I'd like to thank the staff for all of the winter workshops, and thanks to all of our board members and others who've been able to participate. I think we have a recommendation from Board Member Cornell, who said that we should be offering these at least once a month for students in a central location. So I appreciate the time for us making sure that both parents and students had an opportunity to think through and have some guidance on the new curriculums that are being offered. I'd also like to recognize 2 folks, Emily Taubman, who's the Teacher of the Year for the elementary school. Congratulations to her and that presentation today. And then, am I stealing all your thunder? I'm sorry. You got to keep up, Superintendent. And Natasha Medford, who is the Ridgeway Middle School. I follow the district on our social media site, so when I see an opportunity to recognize them, I think it's important to do so. So I think a shout out from you and from me will be very well received by our district employees. I also want to just take a moment and thank Board Member Stephanie Love for her advocacy with the city and not having a landfill that will be in our Fraser community near one of our schools. So I just want to thank her for her advocacy and making sure to keep the interest of our schools and our students in the forefront. And so now I will turn it over to Superintendent for your report.
Well, I think you took it all, Madam Chair. I think I do want to recognize, but I believe it's the State School Board Appreciation Week, and I know you guys have a heart for kids, and oftentimes you don't get the recognition and appreciation that you deserve, but we certainly appreciate the hard work that you do on behalf of our kids every day, so thank you guys. Also want to just really jump right into our KPIs for this month. And then, well, let me do it like this. Just want to make you guys aware that the school performance scorecard is going to actually go live on Friday. I don't know whether we had just a couple slides I wanted to speak to the board about. If they're not ready, it's because you guys have been through this. You guys have had several listening sessions. We've had 3 or 4 listening sessions with our principals, multiple stakeholders, including the board, and the tool itself will go live on Friday. And as the board knows, the reason for the
And so a couple of things that you're seeing here around AP participation and ACT benchmark performance are aligned to that. The other thing I'll remind you of is that we will also come back to additional KPIs related to advanced academics and those early post-secondary opportunities in May. So right now we're going to focus in on AP, but the state also considers participation in dual enrollment courses and IB courses part of that too. So just to keep that in mind that we're looking at one slice of that today. So first we'll start with our AP or ACT information. So here you can see the percentage of students hitting the college readiness benchmarks in 11th grade this past school year in each of the 4 ACT categories. So we've done the best so far in English, where about 30% of our 11th graders met that benchmark this past school year. Next to that is reading, and we've really seen some improvement in the percentage of students meeting that benchmark in this past school year compared to 2 years ago. After that, science and math, there's about the same percentage of students, 12% meeting those benchmarks. And then finally, there are 7% of our, I guess now 12th graders, but last year's 11th graders who met those benchmarks previously. When we look at the 12th grade results on this, we do see some improvement, and you probably saw some recent articles showing that when students are allowed to take the ACT multiple times, they tend to do better, which is really great for them, not having to take as many remedial courses and be ready for college coursework after they graduate. So here you can see that the amount of, or the percentage of students that are meeting each of those benchmarks is about the same in terms of you know, where they're doing best, English and reading. But there is improvement across all of those categories. And for the state, the definition of college readiness includes getting a 21 or higher composite score on the ACT. So you can see on the far right-hand side, 23% of our seniors met that benchmark by the end of that year, last year. So now we'll move on to AP participation. You specifically asked for AP results broken down by different demographic categories. So here, just looking at participation during this current 17-18 school year. On the left-hand side, you'll see the demographic breakdown by race and ethnicity for all of our high school students. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see what the AP participation looks like in demographic terms. So there you'll see that Latino and multiracial students are participating in AP about the same as their demographics would suggest, 11% versus 13%. We see that our black students are comprising the majority of our AP participants, about 2/3, but that is a smaller percentage than the overall demographic.
Mr. Caldwell.
So I just want to make sure I'm reading these things right. So
overall composite score, and it's a weighted average of how they do on each of those
Right.
4 tests. So you might have students that do really well on 2 or 3 areas and maybe not so well on another, but overall the average score will be in between those 2 extremes.
right, but yeah, I understand that per student, but so were these numbers? Did you take that particular number from the data and come up with the 23%, or did you take these and average them together and make that the composite?
No, it's based on each student's composite
Okay,
score.
great.
So
That's
out of
all
all of the students, 23% got a 21 or higher
All right,
composite.
so then we go to this next one about AP participation by race and ethnicity. So my questions are, so we understand why there's a disparity. What kind of things go into the decisions that allow the schools to offer AP? Because my understanding is, some of it is what the principal wants. Some of it is, are there enough students in that school that seem to be ready for AP courses? And then how do we deliver them if we don't have a critical mass of students? So I think all board members want every child to have as many opportunities as they can. But I want to look, data is good at highlighting areas that you ought to look into deeper. So that's why I'm asking these questions. And that's all I have really right now.
So, Ms. Carr, I'm going to ask Dr. Ray to talk about that because we spent a lot of time talking about, one of the biggest drivers for the number of AP course offerings is simply enrollment in a school. And I think that they showed me 6 or 7 schools that don't have any AP courses, and they correspond, I think, to some of our lower enrolled schools. And then, Dr. Ray, if you can kind of speak to the process and how, schools are able to build up a cadre of AP courses, and then talk a little bit about the plan moving forward.
Superintendent Hobson, board members, Mr. Caldwell. First, let me say that, again, this is one aspect of advanced academics. You have International Baccalaureate, Also, you have dual enrollment. That's the complete complement of advanced academics. So AP is one area. So you see the many of our African American students, they are enrolled in dual enrollment. Now, let's talk about the process. I've been working with Ms. Sklar and her team on beefing up all areas, AP, dual enrollment, and International Baccalaureate. One thing we've done is we looked at how a school can select an AP course. So principals meeting was canceled last week. So in the next couple of weeks, it's going to be rolled out to principals how you can get an AP course. Better yet, some schools may have the number of AP students, but they may not have a certified AP teacher. We created a way and a pool that we're going to develop our own advanced placement teachers working with the college board. So we have some things in the pipeline, and we're completing a plan that we will roll out in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. And so I didn't mean that anybody was doing anything wrong, but if you just look at the data, and on
Absolutely.
the surface it looks like that black students aren't getting as many opportunities, but it's not that we're not trying to offer to certain groups. That there's a beginning determination about whether or not they're able to do it, and I think probably includes the other things that you said. And I'm aware that AP is, so it would be nice to see all that, because I think that all those things go into college readiness as well.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad you touched on to the fact about that you have a plan for teachers, because I've been trying to say for the last 2 years, the TPC recommended that we not pay bonuses to teachers based on degrees, because there was no data that shows that it improved academics.
Right.
But nobody bothered to ask the question, are there other reasons for teachers to have advanced degrees? And certainly I think you from what I understand, is AP would be one of the things that would help a teacher become a good AP teacher, is to have an advanced degree.
Yes, sir.
And so I think where I'm getting with this is, I hope my colleagues would consider when budget time comes around that we either figure ways to incentivize teachers to join a program to become an AP teacher, and then figure out how many AP teachers we need to reach the students that need to be reached, and then even consider a second proactive method for incentives to try to draw some of these teachers that we've lost in the last few years
Absolutely.
back to the district. And I think that would be money well spent in my mind. I don't know how my other colleagues feel, but I would hope they would agree with something like that. So
Yes, sir.
that was the purpose for my asking
Yes,
those
sir.
questions. Thank you.
Ms. Love.
Based on the AP participation by race, and I know Dr. Ray spoke on it. You know, I've mentioned several times, probably 15 times, that a lot of times we hear there's no need, but if we don't create the space for our children, how do we know there's no need? I've also suggested that we use the CTC buildings, because we have several schools that attend the CTC buildings for other programs. And if we don't have enough students in 4 or 5 high schools in that feeder area, why are we not exploring the option of putting an AP teacher in those CTC buildings so our children can be bused there? Because we can't continue to say that there's no need at this school, or the need isn't high enough, when we have not tried to do something different. So I've said it several times. So I don't know if we need to do a board resolution to try to just explore that option, because we have CTC buildings where all the classes are not filled. And there's a need for African American participation in our AP classes. So if we don't have enough for one school, are we going to explore the option of putting it at a CTC school and busing children to that CTC program?
So I think, Mr. Nobody's going to disagree in terms of the need. I think that the one of the things this highlights is the equity conversation, right? You know, you obviously have, I think, 2/3 of the students who participate are African American, but when we go to the next slide, I guess just the percentage of kids who pass or receive a 3 on the test and get the college credit, it's a big difference when you look at the racial groups. I think that with regard to the CTC centers, while I agree there's empty space, there's also a lot of empty space in a lot of these high schools that don't have AP courses. So I think the plan, and we'll talk about that in recommendation, I think we've got some funds available from the state to train at least 3 AP teachers in every class. And then we got to figure out too, Ms. Love, how do we attract these AP teachers or incentivize these AP teachers to go to some of these schools that don't have the classes. I mean, the reality is that there's a perception. If somebody you get recruited from a municipal school and they pay for your advanced degree and versus going to a school that may be perceived as being tough to work at, that factors into it. But I think the overall sentiment, Ms. Love, around, you know, we've got to continue to push to make sure everybody has a need. You'll never hear me say that there's no need. I think every school, and we talked about this last couple weeks, I mean, and we'll talk about it during the budget, I mean, every school should offer at least 1 AP class. I mean, we've got 5 or 6 classes that schools that don't offer, and that'll be part of our budgetary ask. But I guess just in summary, you got to have the workforce that can do it. We got to be able to incentivize the workforce to go to places that typically are underserved. And then we got to make sure we think about not just kids showing up at the 9th grade and 10th grade, 11th grade, taking AP courses, but what are we doing with the pipeline so that when they get to the courses, they can actually be successful and then receive the college credit so that, you know, they get the benefit of it.
Thank you, Superintendent Hobson, because I was going to say just that, building capacity in our middle schools. So that's something I've really challenged the team on. Looking at our middle schools, see what we're doing there. We have honors classes. We want to beef up those honors classes to get students ready to take the advanced placement classes.
Mr. Caldwell.
So it would make sense to me that if that's part of the whole chain of what we need to do to improve AP, the participation, that you also ask for the kind of resources you need to beef up those programs in middle school as well.
Yes, sir.
I'm trying.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I don't see any other comments, but I want to echo some of the things my colleagues are saying, that it's really I'm sorry, Mr. Cornell. Just as a side note to that, I think it's very important what Mr. Caldwell and Ms. Love said about making sure that we have a pipeline. And if the state is allowing us to participate in a grant that trains at least 3 AP teachers, we should be looking at that for also the middle schools. And if we're going to make an investment in making sure that those students are ready and prepared to pass the AP courses in high school, that definitely we have to start further upstream. We have to be thinking about that in middle school, and I think that should be a part of our recruitment strategy.
Yes.
Just for the HR team, that those 2 things should go hand in hand. And if our optional schools office is going to be offering a plethora and variety of things that attract students to our district, those are things that have to be a part of a simultaneous effort. Mr. Cornell, I apologize, I didn't see your light.
And I agree with what's been said. On the chart, it says non-charter schools were higher than charter schools, and
That was not
That's not
that was a
equity.
mistake. Your time has just started.
I might have been saved by the bell. That's it. But I also would like to see the difference between those charts, charter, non-charter. In other words, we know that basically non-charter schools are higher than those shown below. It says the rate was 28% as compared to just 13%. Excuse me. For instance, the 2016-17 rate was 28% as compared to just 13% for charter schools. So what was the non-charter rate?
That was, I think, 28%. So it's 28% for non-charter schools and 13% for charter schools. But we can replicate, you want to see these two charts at the bottom
Separate.
broken down by charter versus non-charter. We can provide that.
Okay. The other thing I'd like to see is there can you provide a correlation between, let's see, the AP performance and also the results of the ACT tests? Like
So
if you
how
take-
do students that get a 3 or higher on AP look in terms of ACT outcomes? Okay, sure.
I'm wondering if their scores would match these lines or some other line. Also, when we look at the scores of students based on the state or our own scoring, do we throw in the ACT test?
Are you talking about
As a
on,
comparison, do we have a chart that compares?
are you talking about on TN Ready, like the state assessment?
Yeah. Do we compare those like you're doing here?
Yeah. We could do that. I'm not aware of any analysis to date, but that's definitely something we could look into.
Okay, and one other. Let's see, on the chart it says English 18, Math 22, Reading 22, Science 23. At the bottom of one of these charts. Does that mean that you have to score English, you have to score an 18 in English to be proficient enough for college?
Yes, according to College Board.
And you have to have a 22 in mathematics to be proficient in college?
Yes.
So there may be a lot of students that did 18, 18, 18, and 18, but were not considered proficient for college by the College Board.
Right, so their composite would probably equal out to be about an 18 instead of a 21 in that case. But I think, by looking at that 21 composite, that does honor students that are highly proficient, doing really well in some subjects and maybe not so well in others, because that does mirror, what most people end up doing with the career track is really specializing in, one or two of these areas versus all four.
So if you want to get into, let's say, University of Memphis or a UT school, if they set the entrance at 18, is that the average would be 18, or do they have a floor called 18 for English, 22 for math, 22 for reading?
I'm not familiar with U of M specifically. I think these are based on national standards that College Board is, the provider of the ACT recommends as approximate for being ready for those entry-level college courses.
Okay.
And
So-
I think too, Mr. Cunningham, just for some context, I think that to be eligible for the Hope Scholarship, you have to have a 21 composite, I believe. So that's kind of the baseline to be college ready
Gotcha.
from their perspective.
See, I was wondering if our practice of college ready and entrance is different from the national board definition of college ready. But anyway, thank you. I'd like to see some of these statistics broken down a little more and
Sure.
compared. Thank you.
Ms. Love.
Dr. Ray, when you mentioned middle schools, I'm going to pick on you for a minute. Grandview Middle School. So the principal created Heights Academy. That is a special program he has for the students who are perform a little higher than the other students, and he's using that program as a way to keep the Fraser students in the Fraser community.
Yes, ma'am.
He created that program. It's for you too, Dr. Griffin. He created that program. So I think it's year 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to see, maybe we could have a meeting or whatever. What is the district doing to support that program? When we talk about high quality seats, and we talk about making sure that we have seats in the neighborhood, he's created the program. He can't do it by himself. We have East STEM, so there's a lot of brains working. But what are we doing to make sure that the district is supporting him, to make sure that he has what he needs? He may not have all the answers. I think it's a good program starting off because I see the vision, but I also know that he needs support
Yes, ma'am.
to keep that growing, so that when our children leave that middle school and go to the high school, we'll have more children who can enroll in the AP courses and pass.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Love, what we'll do is we'll set up a meeting with Principal Barber, learn more about the program, and then hopefully we have some recommendations of how we're going to better support it.
Seeing no other questions, Superintendent, I do just have a follow-up question based on the district recommendations, which have asked that we finalize an AP teacher pool and continue to provide intensive support. Are there some benchmarks that we're going to try to achieve in the number of teachers that go through the state certification? Are there some numbers that your staff can provide back to us of how these district recommendations will align with how many students and how many teachers are recruited for this certification, how many actually go through the program, how many expanded AP courses are going to be offered in the next school year, and what is the recruitment strategy for the middle school teachers that could possibly also be AP certified, so that we're keeping a pipeline of both middle and high school students. I think it increases our opportunity for students if they're able to start upstream. But I do think it's good for us to have the district recommendations, but if there's no numbers or ways for us to measure ourselves to success, then next year this time we could still have another set of recommendations that says recruit more teachers.
So I think that's dead on, Ms. Ava. What we'll do is because there's going to be a budgetary ask with this. So I think that all of the metrics and the expected outcomes, and I'm assuming we tracking this, we'll make sure that we present that as part of our budgetary ask.
Thank you. We're moving on. Is there anything else with the superintendent's report? Any other presentations?
And I just want to commend Linda Sklar and Dr. Ray on revising the optional process. This will be the first time that parents don't have to camp out, and I think that there are a lot of people excited about that. So I know they worked really hard for the last few years to get that done, so thank you.
I think Mr. Cornell does have a question, Superintendent.
I have a question. It's sort of informational. We had the winter workshops for homework, and actually the winter, I think, canceled some of them. It was a real winter. So does one of your staff have an idea when they might be rescheduled or what's coming down the road?
Yes, sounds like Mr. Cornell.
So we can tell people that if there's going to be some new ones.
Sir, we're in a process of reschedule those meetings now. I know school was just in on yesterday, so we're trying to get the schools to get back acclimated into teaching and learning. So you'll be hearing from us soon.
And Mr. Superintendent, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, I thought that the administration made a great call this winter about what days to come in and what days not to come in. And I'm hoping that by being out, we actually slow down the flu season in the city and in the schools. So thank you very much.
Mr. Caldwell, you've had 2 times to talk.
Yeah, I forgot to say that I just wondered if during the summer learning academies, if that would be an opportunity to identify kids either to go into the AP programs or give them some kind of supports. If we have them in a building, maybe trying to reach them somewhere. That was all.
That's a good thought.
So, Superintendent, to Mr. Caldwell's, would we be offering the Summer Learning Academy in high schools this year? Because that was just for elementary schools this past summer. So is there an opportunity for that?
Yes.
And the ask that you're going to be bringing forward?
We will be very excited to let the board know probably February we're going to expand the Summer Learning Academy to have some middle and high school too.
Middle and high, yes. I think we budgeted 2,500 middle, 2,500 high. So of course, it's based on a need, and I'm quite sure if we have more students that's interested, we will have more opportunities for middle and high. So.
And I think, Mr. Caldwell, I think to your point, we, certainly will try to. But if you think back on the purpose of the Summer Learning Academy, it really was those, tier 2 and tier 3 kids. But what we found out last year was that there was such a demand, and oftentimes there were other than tier 2 and tier 2 and tier 3 kids. So if we can expose kids and get them in and identify folks, we certainly push that.
I was just trying to piggyback on something that was successful. If we, you know, we get if we have, because they may have siblings that the parents are dropping off them, and they might be looking for some place for their older children.
And absolutely, and also looking at the data, we're going to focus on ACT in high school. So,
Thank you, Ms. Caldwell. Superintendent. We're going to move on to our staff action items. We're moving to 7.1 Medicaid reimbursement for a dollar amount of $204,500.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is something we've been trying to work through the last few years. Essentially, there are some states where a lot of special ed services are reimbursable through Medicare, Medicaid. Tennessee has a lot of rules, though, there are a lot of restrictions, so we're trying to work through that with the legislative session undergoing. We're part of a study committee with some other schools. And but essentially what this is company comes in, they help us to build the system out, get reimbursements, and they get about 15% of whatever they collect. The state did an RFP a couple years ago and selected this vendor. We actually used the vendor. I've been using it over the last couple of years, and the success is getting better and better. But we hope that once the restrictions are laxed at the state, we can start to see a lot more dollars being recovered.
Seeing no questions, Superintendent, do we have an estimated amount of what we could be looking for as far as reimbursements for students on average for our sped population?
I'm going to ask Ms. Moore to speak. I think we did $1 million last year, but there are some districts, Ms. Avant, in different states, similar size, that get 7, 8, 9, 10 million. So the main thing, though, is that we are now limited to some of the services. Well, let me ask Ms. Moore to speak to that.
Good evening.
Good evening.
If we were allowed to really bill for all of the services and restrictions were relaxed, we could probably bring in $2 to $3 million. We're working with the state task force to bring in opportunities for us to bill for more services, such as transportation, mental health, psychologists, and social workers. But these are services that are provided to students with disabilities who are receiving medical services at school and receiving Medicaid. So with the help of PCG and our state legislature, we should be able to bring in more money.
Mr. Orgel?
This is, I was trying to think of another example. I think one of them was something a few years ago. We were doing something with credit cards and getting reimbursements. Len, how much do we make off that? Like yeah, so it's ramped up. So I think that's what someone had told us, the previous person. And but this is like we're leaving money on the table.
Absolutely.
And whose idea was this? They should get like an extra day off for some other stuff.
It was all my idea. No.
And
No,
everybody except the superintendent should get an extra day off.
No, Miss Moore and her team, I know, Dr. Termina too, been working on this for a long time, and I think we're starting to see it bear some fruit.
Did Mr. Page have anything to do with it? I saw his name on there too.
He's
part
been
of the
behind the
team,
scenes
right?
pushing very hard.
But no, anyway, but I mean, there's probably other when you find this, and like Ms. Cornell's good about it. Like when we start talking about grants, like and Tony Geraci was good about USDA grants and finding areas. I mean, we should challenge our folks to do wonderful things. Maybe there should be. I know companies do it, like government does it sometimes. Money saving ideas, where we incent people to come up with ideas that we could save money. Our engineering staff probably comes up with great ideas sometimes of things we can do that we could apply to 200 different buildings and stuff. But this is, and did you say $2 to $3 million?
We're hopeful if
I
we
mean, the
get all
money
the
was just hanging
restrictions
there, so
relaxed.
Exactly.
I just applaud you. I read through it and don't understand it all, but I like the way you did it. So we're paying there's somebody who does this for you.
Yes, public consulting group, PCG.
And so it's like a collection agency, but for different kind of collections. So they're specialists in doing this and do it for other school districts?
Yes, yes.
Gotcha. I think it's a great idea. I just wanted to applaud you and the staff.
Mr. Caldwell?
I would just say, I think it's very similar to what the city does about collecting past due, parking tickets. So they don't have the infrastructure to do it on their own, so they get it out to experts.
Seeing no other questions, I thought Mr. Caldwell's question is where will we put this additional funds in our budget? I thought I was gonna, preempt that question. I knew that was what he was gonna say next, where we're gonna put those funds once we do collect them, but I think it's very noteworthy of the staff for us to be able to find ways that we can continue to support our students.
Yes, because I remember we were talking about, in that meeting the other day, about adding back some things that didn't get done that you were requesting, and rightfully so.
Absolutely.
Yep. That's the only reason I'm interested in money.
Ms. Love, you done? Okay. Well, I think once we have identified what the dollar amount, I think we could come back with the superintendent, obviously, and make some recommendations. But I'm sure the staff will have some for us.
Yes, we do.
Mr. Cornell?
Yes, where did she go? Is that your only question? Did you get reimbursed?
We're working on all
Okay.
reimbursements.
But you had mentioned to me before when we talked about the committee, the task force that's been put together.
Yes, I have Dr. Lori Boehner here. She is actually a member of the task force. She is one of our she is the lead occupational therapist, and I would like for her to come up because she is a member. She could tell us exactly what they're doing to give you specific updates.
The reason I bring this up is this was a task force put together by a state Senate committee, and they will be reporting back this year, I believe.
Yes.
So our legislative chair, co-chairs, I just want to point that out, that's something we might want to watch to make sure that if it's a good recommendation, that whatever's needed to fulfill it is added to the budget. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd say too, Mr. Cornell, I think that for the board members who are going today on the Hill, this would be a good topic. I think it's the rules are really kind of dictated by the health organizations, and so to the extent that we could get the rules changed and be able to submit more claims for reimbursement, better for school district.
Seeing no other lights, we're going to move on to 7.2, Shelby County School Partnerships with Achieve 3000, in the amount of $2.8,555,400.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think all the board members are pretty familiar with Achieve 3000. We've been pleased with it this year, and the reason we're bringing this early is because a couple reasons. We want to be able to be set up for the Summer Learning Academy, and then also Achieve has offered us a bunch of extra things to bring it early, namely some work around science. The science standards are changing this year, so we're getting a bunch of no-cost stuff there for this year, and then also they did a great job under Dr. Ray's leadership last year, pulling it off, having this available to students last year, but they really did have to do it in a very short period of time. So we want to make sure we have time to do that well, and then take advantage of the additional services that we provide.
Mr. Cornell?
Yes, how long have we had the contract?
I think we just had 1 year. This is the second year.
And then how many kids are covered? What grades?
So it would be, it's our RTI tool, intervention tool for, I guess, really K through 5. Yeah.
Okay, so
It says K through 12 it says K-12 on the document.
Can you speak?
as we've been mentioning the last couple of years about contracts and making sure that they work or they produce, when will we know whether or not this contract works? I know we got a good recommendation from a study committee, but now that it's implemented, when will we know, and on what basis will we know that it's working?
I think we won't have our first batch of real data, Mr. Cornell, to the end of this year, because it's the first year it's been fully implemented. So I think that what you have to do is kind of compare how our Tier 2 and Tier 3 kids did this year versus next year, versus last year when we had the different tools. So it probably will be at the end of this year before we have a true apples to apples comparison between this tool and the tool that we used
And will the-
last year.
And
Well,
just to
that-
annotate
go ahead.
a little bit of that is,
Well, let me ask, I'm
Okay.
interested in knowing what would be comparing state data versus what would be comparing other contract data that we're using
Got it.
to analyze the kids' progress.
and I was just going to add to the superintendent's point that the academic team, I think the strategy team and the finance team actually have gotten together. in
Then
terms
speak into
of-
your microphone, please.
Sorry. The strategy and the performance management team, the academic team and the finance have gotten together to look at RTI2 interventions and Achieve 3000 as part of it, where we're trying to evaluate whether there is a positive ROI on it. And that research has been going on throughout the year. So I think probably in March or April, we've done some benchmarking, but starting in March or April, we'll be able to tell whether a student, how they perform before Achieve 3000 and after Achieve 3000 as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad that we're using that accountability. Is this going to be applied to other contracts as well? And I see yes.
We're happy to apply it, and this was one way to do a pilot. But obviously, we want to be prudent with public dollars to evaluate whether we're getting the bang for our dollars.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Love?
Dr. Ray, this was used for our summer academy? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
And do you know offhand how many of our schools, is this a program that all schools use, or do schools have an option of using it?
This is a part of our intervention program, so all of our schools are using Achieve 3000, also with our Ready. So Achieve is our RLA based intervention, while our Ready is our math. But also I want to emphasize that we're going to be working with Achieve 3000 to do a linking study about how our students are achieving, how they're growing over the year using the data, and then comparing it to our 10 Ready standards.
Okay. And I also want to let board member Cornell know that they have plenty of online opportunities. My daughter gets on there often. And I do want to commend this company because I know we always talk about our vendors giving back, and they did provide, I believe, iPads to parents as door prizes for our community meetings when we had our academic plan.
And I think just to annotate that, Ms. Love, I think that, for the listening audience, what happens is, per the state processes, kids start the year, they have to be tested. And if you are Tier 3, then you have to spend so many hours working on some type of supplement, and we use this computer intervention. And that's why I think that when people hear so much about testing, the state mandates test you. If you're in the bottom 15%, you're Tier 3, you have to spend so much time on the computer being tested. And so all that is driven by the state process. And we use Achieve 3000 to test for those kids or to help them improve their instruction in ELA. And also it's what's called a progress monitor to see whether they're getting better. So when we start talking about all this testing, you have to look at it all together. It's not that the Shelby County Schools is making people do a bunch of tests. It's just if you're Tier 3, then you have to demonstrate that you're getting better. And the way that you do that traditionally is through different kind of computer interventions. And that's what Achieve 3000 does.
Mr. Caldwell? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have?
I just
some-
want to add that Achieve 3000 is also certifying 100 teachers that can train other teachers. So at the end of the contract, we'll have 100 certified teachers that can also train other teachers to Achieve 3000. So, free of charge.
Mr. Caldwell.
Yes, I have a couple questions. The first one, I looked at this master license agreement, and it says June 30th of 2016. So that means it would have run to June of 17. So is that just we put the wrong contract on here?
It must be, because it goes through 18. It goes through June. We would have, Ms. Noble, I see you shaking
Because
your
I
head.
thought this was the second year.
Yes, it is, yeah. So we just,
Those are the master terms and agreement, the master terms and conditions that we signed in 2016, but those automatically renew. But when you start to make a purchase, then there's a proposal and a quote, and usually we bring it back to the board because it's in excess of $100,000. So the proposal that's attached is for
Just speak a little closer to the microphone, please, Ms. Noble.
the proposal that's attached to the agenda is for the new school year. It will be for the upcoming school year. The master terms and conditions are not for purchasing, but they govern the terms of any purchase that we make, and that's what he was referencing to in 2016. That's when we first signed the master agreement.
Okay, that's fine, but, so this is but if the master agreement was signed in 16, that was the first year, right? 16, 17.
Yes,
And then the second year is 17, 18,
yes,
which we're in right now.
yes.
So we're looking for the 18, 19 year. So I think there was something on here that made me think that this was just the second year. I don't know, if, anyway, I'm getting old, I probably read it wrong. Just now I got it right. Okay, so this also says K through 12. What other interventions, are there different interventions for the high schools or, the middle and high schoolers?
We have the interventions that will lead the literacy platform, so we can continue to address the lifestyle of
Okay, so do we currently have all the materials, for those kids as well? Okay, great. And then I was looking at one of the things that said the cost per student was $29.50. So being somewhat nuts, or not, maybe not even somewhat, I divided that into the divided that into the amount of the contract, and so we're serving 96,000 kids right now with this. 700, is that right?
I think that Mr. Caldwell misspoke earlier. I think it's for pre-K through 12. It's not K through 5, yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm sorry, that's right. You're right, I was wrong. All right. So don't we get instant feedback on these students, but when they go through these RTIs, and so is there not some data available? I understand the need to get it ready for summer academies, but aren't you capturing data now on how the students are progressing?
We are capturing data. I'm going to get it.
Well, I don't want it now, but I just would hope that before we vote in the business meeting, we get that would give us some sense of the improvement, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay,
We sent you this data chart, so we'll get that to you as well.
okay. All right, well, if I overlooked it, then that's on me. So it is in what you provided? Okay, well, I guess I clicked on the wrong one. All right, thanks.
Board Member Caldwell, but we also get the weekly reports that shows where the kids move from their tier group based on the number of minutes in the sessions that they complete, and then teachers then respond to the weekly reports to provide individualized instruction. So every week we get those intervention reports, and then that guides your instruction. So we don't have to wait to a formative benchmark to really know where the kids are.
Okay. Well, that sounds like that's a very important aspect of it, and having timely information. So that was all just trying to get a sense of how well it's doing, and if it's something that you know, we need to expand in some way or, you know, offer it more places. Thank you.
Ms. Love?
We do.
To help answer some Board Member Caldwell's question, the students were tested in August, I believe, and then we received those results back as a parent. And they were tested again, and on yesterday, I received my daughter's reports back. Yeah, so she's doing very, very well as it relates to literacy. So I would like it sent home with the report card. That's just a suggestion. I would. So I don't know how you would start that testing, but parents should have received something. Well, I received something yesterday from my child's school as far as where they are and where they should be.
Seeing no other questions, I did have a question, Superintendent. When we first reviewed this contract, I thought that it was that everyone could have and achieve 3,000, so it wasn't just the Tier 2 and Tier 3. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so just so that, just for the listening public, if parents, Ms. Love is one of those parents who's going to make sure that her children get every aspect that is offered, I think if we're saying that this contract provides services for all of our students, regardless if they're in Tier 2, 3, or 1, that we need to make sure that schools are really pushing this out for all students to have their login, and that was one of the reasons why I voted for the contract originally, was that any student could utilize their user word or password, whether they were in school or they were at home. And so if we're utilizing all capacities of this particular contract or any others, I just want to make sure that all of our parents are aware, and it wouldn't be just the listening public, but that the schools are really pushing that out for all of our students. And there's a parent piece according to Ms. Love, so we need to be using all of those things for our parents, even in the winter workshops, if that's possible for us to share with our parents. No other questions. I'm going to move on to 7 point.
So I'm going to embarrass myself if I can. So I'm looking at all these documents that are on the board website. I don't see anything that shows. So did you say it's on the district website, the results, or because it's not in this information? Because I'm looking. There's a master license agreement. There's contract for pre-K, for literacy, achieve 3,000. You know, 4 things that say they're contracts. So I thought you cited some data.
I'll make sure you get it tonight. It should have been a form. We'll get that to you.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks.
So, Superintendent, there's a couple things they're going to make sure that the weekly reports and where we've shown growth for students, so that board members have some of that data before they're making a decision next week on this particular item.
Are we tracking with the homework?
Yes, and then also we want to make sure that the weekly reports are for our Tier 2 and Tier 3 students. Even though that all of our students will have access, the reports track our Tier 2, our Tier 3 students of how many times they stay on, and how many, the number of sessions, and even the completion rate, whether it gets 75% of the questions correct. And so I wanted to make sure that we call that out as well, that the report is for our Tier 2 and Tier 3 students. But all students will have access.
All students have access to,
Yes.
To the particular program.
Yes.
Okay, and we'll have that information for board members. They just want to see, I think Mr. Caldwell's request is just to see how students are progressing thus far based on the tool. Okay, moving on. We're at 7.3, which would be canned poached fruit and vegetable items in the amount of $429,352.
That's exactly what it is, Madam Chair.
All right, Mr. Cornell didn't ask. We're going to move on to 7.4, produce, fresh fruit and vegetables direct to school sites for February through May 2018. That's 7.4.
I'll ask you for that.
Mr. Caldwell.
Where are those vegetables grown? Are they locally? Are they out of the country? We dropped in off of satellites or anything?
And making sure that there's no chemicals being used in planting or producing those vegetables.
And they get
trying to help.
They get lots of light.
And lots of light. Did we get it all, Mr. Cornell? Okay. All right, 7.5 would be fresh fruit and vegetable program for August through November 2017 and February through May. So this FY 17 for August through November 17th. Is that correct? That says first quarter. And it should be, we're just voting on third quarter?
Two separate timeframes. So what's listed is for August through November of 17, and then February through May of 18. So they're two different periods of time.
And
they-
this is
and
an amount of
covers both.
$337,275. However, November, can you just explain how August, November, because that time frame is already passed?
So I
Because it just
think
needs to be a correction in the.
no, it's correct. Ms. Glover.
For August through November, the state had additional money that they bounced back to us to provide to provide opportunities to serve through the FFEP program 4 days a week rather than 3. So we took advantage to offer it to our students because our funds were increased.
Okay, so just as clarification, this is for us this item is asking us, this is a grant to us, or this is a grant paying, or this is an amount we're paying out to Palazzolo?
This was based off of our previous bid for August through November. And because our August through November revenue from the state was more money, then we got to purchase more fruit.
So Superintendent, my question is, even if we had received more funds, are we still just allocating that to the time frame that we're in, which is February through May of 2018?
Are we allocating it for?
So this is a request for us to approve an item in the amount of $337,275.48 for fruits and vegetables, and it is to a vendor. So my question is, should the time frame that should be listed in this contract with the vendor carry the period that we're currently in, which is February through May, regardless of how the funds were given to us to pay for the fruits and vegetables? I think just making sure that the contract itself reflects the time period that we're in, for the record.
Yes, it should include the total amount for I think it's 1.2 million for February through May.
Okay, so I'm gonna just, we'll follow.
I
if we
think,
could get-
yeah, I'll follow up, and I think what you're asking is the time period has passed, and so we need to reconcile back to the original agreement and the original time frame.
Thank you. Just
Okay.
in case this is more or less, if you're telling us it's for two different time frames, just which time frame are we
Right.
you're asking us to
Yep.
approve a budget item for? Moving on, if there's no other questions, to 7.6, miscellaneous commercial food items for 2017-2018 school year in the amount of $777,667.
Madam Chair, it's for meal packs, pickle relish, vinegar, fruit slush pouches, to replenish the warehouse stock.
Seeing no lights, we're moving to 7.7, inventory audit and reconciliation of capital and trackable asset services in the amount of $385,000.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will ask Ms. Phelan to speak to this.
Sure. So this is for a project to do a physical asset inventory. The project will run from February through April, and it's to focus on fixed and capital assets, to tag and replace tags, and also kind of validate all the inventory submission that we've gotten from the schools and also from the district offices. It's also meant to help us clean data before we do the migration to Oracle and ERP. Also, it'll address some of the items identified in the Council of Great City Schools report as well.
Seeing no lights, we're gonna move on to 7.8. It's a warehouse lease extension and in the amount of, what is the amount? What is it saying is right now? What is the total amount?
15,000.
Did they have a total amount in there? I'm
Miss-
sorry, it's in the amount, there's been a change in the language. I just want to make sure that I'm reading it. It's in the amount of a contract approval for a rate of 15,000 per month from December to March of 2018.
I think, Ms. Abraham, that there was not a final number because that last month, they were gonna go a daily rate. So
Right.
it's 15,000 a month, and then it's $500 a day in
That's correct.
April.
In a prorated fashion based on the days they need it.
Okay. So just as reading into the record, this is an amount of 15,000 per month, but we're moving from a daily rate of $500 a day through April of 2018.
That's correct.
Prorated. Okay. Seeing no lights, and I think we discussed this one in facilities, so it's probably been vetted pretty well. Seeing no lights, we'll move on to 7.9. Demolition project of Fairley Elementary School in the amount of $157,332.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think as the chair knows, I think this is in your district. We combined Fairleigh, Rains Haven, and West Haven, and we just want to demolish Fairleigh. It's in very, very bad shape.
Seeing no questions, Superintendent, I do want to just ask that before, as we have done with other demolitions, if there's a way for us to notify the folks that are in that community that this is going to happen. There should be some kind of public notice that we can put out so that the folks within that community are aware of what will be transpiring.
Sure, we'll work with Communications Chief on that.
Thank you. 7.10 capable property land purchase agreement in the amount of $475,000. Seeing no lights, I did neglect to mention one particular item, 7.4. It's produce, fresh fruit and vegetables direct to school sites for February through May 2018, the amount of $1,228,781. Seeing no lights, we'll move on to 7.11. Award for education funding, Tennessee Department of Education, Office of Healthy Safety and Supportive Schools in the amount of $549,800.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a grant, and I think that we have provided a breakdown of how the funds will be expended. But it's from the Department of Education for Office of Healthy, Safe, and Supportive Schools.
Seeing no lights, we're going to move on to 7.12, first quarter FY 17-18 financial statements.
Lynn.
B2. Here are the first quarter financial statements. They were presented in the Budget and Audit Subcommittee a few weeks ago. As a procedural step with the Shelby County government, they've asked that these be represented back to the board and the working session as well. So I'm taking that step now.
Mr. Caldwell?
Yes, I think we talked about this in one of the board meetings, the committee meetings. So I'm looking at, and it just came up before, I'm looking at SCIAA dues and fines, and it shows $746,284. I show that they, the revenues to date, $321,412, and then the expenditures to date, $262. So now they've got more money than they started the year with. And I think I saw that they had about I don't know what the balance was, but my question is, and I'm not suggesting that I have any authority to tell them how to run that department, but when I hear from principals that the athletic programs don't have enough money for uniforms and other things, I don't know. I would like to know why we would carry a balance of money that might really help these schools and help the kids, you know, that play sports get new uniforms or be better equipped.
So Board Member Cardwell, you're absolutely right that the board shared that concern in the Audit and Finance Subcommittee. And the finance team has met with student support, and as part of the budget amendment that we have as the next item, there's about $265,000 that will be reallocated to schools. High schools will get about $5,000, and middle schools would get about $3,000 to pay for uniforms and other athletics. So that's kind of our way. We've heard the board loud and clear. That's our way to reduce that reserve within that project and start using that money to benefit kids today.
Thank you very much. Good job.
Seeing no other questions, we're moving on to the 7.13 January 2018 budget amendment.
Sorry. For the January 2018, there are a couple highlights that I would like to point out to the board in terms of changes to our budget that are worth noteworthy. The first relates to our general fund. For our general fund, we are increasing our general fund by about $12.8 million. We received additional, our BEP funding was about $20.1 million above what we budgeted. Part of that has been offset by a reduction in what we typically receive in indirect costs for nutrition, and that's about 7.1. So there's about 12.8 that we're reallocating. Part of that reallocation, the majority of that is going towards the Superintendent Learning Academy, also to strengthen up HR recruitment, along with that having cameras for security, and other items as well. Along with that, for nutrition, the nutrition fund, that budget is being reduced from $89.7 million to $86.6 million. And the reason behind that is twofold. One, like I said earlier, there's a reduction in indirect costs. So the nutrition fund no longer has that as a cost, the $7.4 million. But along with that, it also did receive an increase in terms of food service equipment of about 4.2. So the net reduction in the nutrition fund will be about 3.1. And then to the special revenue funds, there's two items. One relates to the urban strategy, and we're amending the budget by $308,000 to include a new grant that we received from HUD in partnership with Booker T. Washington and a number of community organizations. And the second relates to an earlier point that was shared with that Board Member Cardwell brought up, which relates to the SCI AA duals and funds. There's about $265,000 that will be redistributed to schools as well. There's a number of federal grants, and this is the time that we prepare for monitoring and compliance with the state. So we are at the point where we are truing up our budget. But I'll just hit two or three of the big grants that are worth noting. Title IV Part A, we have received those funds. The state has accepted our application, and that was for $1.5 million as well. For Title I Part A, we're decreasing the budget by $3.4 million. And largely that is a factor that we use average salaries when we do our grant budget for Title I, and the salaries amount is much lower than what we had expected. And then the last and the third relates to Title II, Part A. We have been carrying kind of a carryover for Title II, Part A. This year will be a year where we will not have a carryover. We're expecting to have no carryover by the end of the school year as well. Obviously, there's Title II is an area that we're constantly keeping an eye out, especially with the possibility that federal funds could be cut as well. And then the last relates to the Capital Improvement Fund. And for the Capital Improvement Fund, the budget is being reduced by $5.2 million. Part of that is about $3.1 million that got reallocated to from the Shelby County government to support the Regions One Health. The second part of it is expired funds from 2014 that the Shelby County Commission has informed us that we can't use any further.
Mr. Caldwell.
Thanks for the report, Lynn, and I think y'all are doing a good job. So I'm going back to this SCIA thing. And so I know that we have a policy that if we have a budget and it's not spent by a certain time, it goes back to the general fund. So when they take in money that's dues and fines, is that restricted to just be spent there? So
no, that's an excellent question. So we do have that policy, and it relates to our general fund. The SCIAA dues and funds are in our special revenue funds. So any funds that they collect and that do not get spent, it kind of rolls over, and they're able to spend those funds the following year.
Okay, well, my concern is that they're not spending the funds.
Yeah.
And so I would like, just for education, to look back a couple of years and then try to get a better idea and maybe make suggestions if they don't have any about where to spend the money. But I also think we ought to consider a policy that if there are budgets left over, balances left over in budgets that are revenue, and we didn't address that because that was not money that the district was paying out.
Right.
But I think we ought to treat that the same way. And I'm not trying to pull money away from people. I don't even care if you give them a heads up and say, hey, we're coming toward the end of the year, is this money going to be spent on something, or otherwise we're going to reallocate it? Or I don't think there's enough money in sports as it is. So this is not one that I'd want to reallocate to another department, but I just encourage them to spend it, or at least bring us some kind of plan. Because the money's being paid by parents, and they're out there raising money, and it's just it doesn't need
your
to be
point
set
is,
up.
I completely understand, and yes, we can provide a trend analysis before the next board meeting as well.
Yeah, and I don't mean to harp on this, and I don't mean to come across the wrong way. My wife explains to me all the time I do. So I just wanted you to know this was not that, it wasn't meant as criticism. It was, but I hope it didn't come across that way.
I think to your point, Ms. Caldwell, I think that the challenge for me and the team, and particularly athletics, we just got to do better. We know that there are a lot of schools out there that have needs in terms of uniforms, and you go to some schools that got great stuff and some schools don't. So there's no reason why, if we've got recurring balance, basically, that we shouldn't be taking care of our schools. There's just no reason for that.
Mr. Cornell.
Yeah, on the first page, talk about the Nutrition Services Fund. I'm going to use that as a segue to my question, and that is, when the snow and the ice kept kids out of school, we of course didn't feed them during that week. Does that save us some money for later?
likely it would save us money if we're not making up those days.
Okay. And during that week, a lot of our students are not getting the hot meals and food that they normally get at school. And I noticed that our communications office did put out a communication showing how much we partner with Food Bank and other services to get food to kids. Is there an allowance by the federal grant for us to provide food during snow days to children? Is it, do you know?
We're gonna.
I mean, can we use any of that money to do that?
I don't know. I would have to defer to Ms. Governor.
Or during a disaster, or during a heat wave, or during a ice and
Our,
stuff?
our allowance to provide meals when school is out would have to be through the supper program or the at-risk supper program, not through the regular school day. The regular school day only covers the days that students are in school. The at-risk program covers the days that students are out of school. But at the same time, a lot of the community centers were closed as well. So we didn't get to provide meals to those community partners as well.
So there is a list of things to do in the event that we're out of school a number of days and families need food. Is that, do we have a game plan that we can?
Now we're as in nutrition services, we're open to providing meals even at the school site, but at the same time, there has to be supervision there for the children for us to provide meals to them.
Okay. Well, I'd like to ask the administration to be thinking about what we can do next time. And I know they couldn't get to school, and it was too dangerous to drive the kids in the buses, but I'm wondering what all we can do if this happens again. Since there's climate change, we may never know. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I have a second question, and that is on page 3, Title I, Part A, improving the academic achievement of the disadvantaged. Why did you say we lost? Did I hear wrong? You said we lost 3.4 million because we don't pay enough salaries or something like? I didn't understand what you were saying.
So, and I'm looking at page 4H, page 4, section H.
I'm looking at page 4, paragraph 1.
Okay.
Which is
That says Title I,
I,
Part A.
Title I, Part A, funds by 3.366.459.
That's right. So that is how much that budget is being reduced by, is $3.4 million. And what I was stating is that for the budget, it's an initial estimate, and what we do for an initial estimate is use the average salaries. So when we hire teachers who are or coaches or staff who are below the average, then there's less in terms of the budget.
You have to recalibrate.
That's right.
Reinterpolate, or what do they call it? Thank you.
Ms. Love.
This is simple, Lynn. On page 4, it has a department description. At the end, it says other. What is it?
No, this. Which section are you looking at?
Shelby County Schools year-to-date financial dashboard. It's the dashboard. It has the general fund total revenue, the total expenditures, so page 4.
Yep. Sorry, I was looking at the budget amendment. I apologize. So for other objects and debt, and we actually do somewhat of a breakdown of that. The objects and debt, we obviously have debt that we're still carrying. It's about we have a payment budgeted this year for $73,000. The other amount that relates to it relates to fixed assets or relates to fees that we have to pay as well. And I can provide a breakdown for that because that's a great question.
Mr. Caldwell.
So I think this is kind of a left-handed way, and I am left-handed to get where I wanted to go, but this is about the budget. But this conversation came up when Ms. Avant raised an issue about if we had excess funds to put something back in. And so I asked you the question about tax revenues that have been collected by the county. So, and I think we just touched on last year, but hasn't it been 2 years that they carried over, or they waited a year to pay us? So are we behind 1 year, or are we behind 2 years?
So for last year, I think all of Shelby County, including Shelby County government, including Shelby County schools, was behind 2.5. We received 2.5 less than what we should have received in the education fund, and the impact to us was about 1.9.
Okay.
Now, and that was effective in fiscal year 16 and 17. And the reason why we received from the Shelby County administration is that there wasn't enough revenue collected in order to pay the full amount for the education fund for all of Shelby County, including us as well.
Okay.
And to your question in terms of, was that just a 1 year occurrence versus a 2 year occurrence? I don't want to say, let me go back, Board Member Caldwell, on that, because it may have been a different circumstance related to that, but we may have still been impacted twice.
Yeah, and I remember the county commission just saying, well, we'll hold that and then give it to you, but if they keep holding us and they keep shorting us, we're never getting it. So I'd just like to find out how much we're behind, and then see if we can't get with them to try to make some changes about that, and have a system where we get what we're entitled to get.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And obviously that's a risk this year as well.
And I think it hurts us more than it does the municipal districts, because you're talking about a bigger amount, even though percentage-wise it's probably the same, but there's a lot more than you could do with 1.9 million than $100,000, even if you don't have a lot of kids.
That's correct.
And especially when we got somewhat shafted on the Title I money, because they got credit for the Title I kids that were in the district when we were merged, and so their Title I kids get more per student than we do, which is just, so we need to look at everything we can to make sure we get what we deserve.
Absolutely.
And I don't mind if it's a little more than we deserve.
Mr. Orgel.
So I was going to follow up on that, Lynn, and thank you, Chris, for bringing that up. So I was listening, trying to understand. So they're holding back money to make sure that their collections, so it's kind of like retainage or something.
Yeah. So Board Member Orgel, they were holding back funds, especially in terms of the will tax last year. They were slow to come in, and primarily the reason was to make sure that they had the sufficient amount to pay us, and that there wouldn't be any overpayment. Now, when we did a final true-up, we all have the same year-end close in Tennessee, and our year-end close is August 31st. What we determined, and they confirmed, is that we were short $1.9 million, and the primary reason why we were short $1.9 million from their standpoint is that they didn't have enough tax revenue come in to support the education fund.
Well, but through maintenance of effort, so you have to that 1.9 should have been included in our allocation. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
trying to
and
understand.
I think you know, we the superintendent shared a letter of this concern to the county commissioners, expressing that, you know, how we felt like this was a violation of maintenance of effort.
And just so you know, Mr. Ogle, we had a lot of back and forth with the county's CAO, and obviously, you know, having been through a lawsuit around maintenance of effort, you know, so our position was and still is that it's not enough to budget it, you have to actually give it to us. And so they took the position that, well, no, since the revenue did not come in a way that we thought, and it was short, we don't have to give it to you. So we've been actually trying to work with some of the county commissioners who said they're trying to raise it with the administration. This has been probably going on for the last 3 or 4 months, but it has not been resolved.
So, just quickly, remind us all, the split of revenue, I know we have a maintenance of effort, which is how much each year?
So our relative share of the maintenance of effort is about 79%.
Okay, and then do we get a certain amount of tax revenues that come in, like from the wheel tax or from the, what's the percentage?
Sorry. So we do get a particular percentage. The ADA is applied to our property tax and is applied to our sales tax. Now for our wheel tax, let me just.
That's
pull
okay. It's
that.
okay.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine. But so is this primarily the wheel tax that didn't come in, and
No,
or is it
it's
you
a
mentioned
combination of property tax. It's also a combination of other taxes as well. And the premise of their argument, as the superintendent stated, is that you can budget for maintenance of effort, which they did budget for maintenance of effort.
Okay.
But you know what they're saying is that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to pay out, you know, the full amount, even though you budgeted for it. So the total budget that it should have been was 419.5. That's how much was appropriated in budget. What all of Shelby County and the municipalities received was 417 million. And they said we you know, because we budgeted the right amount, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are obligated to pay you the full amount. We strongly disagree with that.
So maintenance of effort, I thought it was that minimal funding level that
Yes.
was set.
Yes.
So it didn't meet, and that's state law. I know Rodney had to run, but
That's right.
okay. And then, so what action did the county commission take?
They haven't taken any action yet.
It's so you're just one superintendent, even though you're 79% of the superintendents. Population-wise, there are 5 or 6 other superintendents.
We've
Most
all,
used to work for SCS, right? So,
we,
what are they saying about this?
we've all discussed it, Mr. Orgo, and you know we've been trying to get a legislative fix through our county commissioners, but for whatever reason, again, I think it's month 5 or so, and it's still isn't resolved. And I think too, just to your point, Mr. Orgo, that what they said is that, well, typically we've never used the wheel tax to fund, and whenever it would be short, we would use the wheel tax to fund, but since they had to give us the wheel tax last year, they don't have any way to fund the difference. But I remember from the lawsuit we had to sit in Memphis, it's not a budgeting issue, it's an actual funding issue. And we've been very clear on that, but it has not been resolved yet. And the municipal superintendents are impacted at the same percentage as well.
Yeah. I bet you have 13 county commissioners that are big supporters of education, and that covers everybody in the county.
Well,
I know we feel like, because we have this conversation, that we're not funded enough, that maintenance of effort may fall short of what we need across the county. But we've got 7 municipal districts represented by 13 people who have single-member districts
Yeah.
that are in an election cycle that are supporters of education.
I agree, Mr. Orgo. I think the board has to decide at what point, you know, do we really push it in another forum. I mean, like, I know I've had conversations with the chair. She's been supportive. The budget chair, he's been supportive. They know, but it's still not resolved.
Okay, well, I appreciate your effort. Thanks for the explanation.
Ms. Love?
Going back to Board Member Orville, Superintendent, I think, this is a perfect opportunity to get all the board members involved, because we all have a county commissioner that represents us in our districts. And, I don't know if communications needs to get involved, because I know we did our Students Deserve More campaign, and it may need to be our Students Need All of Their Money campaign. So, I don't know how, we need to do this, but I think, I don't know if you need to send us a briefing, talking points, but I think this is something that we need to get onto tomorrow.
I do want to just note too, Ms. Love, I know we sent, when this was raised, when we sent the letter to the commission, actually copied the board just so the board knew what was going on. But, I mean, there's some other options we can talk about too.
Mr. Caldwell?
So, are they saying that they're not getting the whole 1.9 million or the 2 million they owe us, or are they saying they're only getting a portion of it, so they're not going to pay out what they have?
So what they're saying is that they're not getting the full $419.5 million, last year for the education fund. So they're just only going to ADA out what they receive.
Okay, so I agree with Board Member Orville and Board Member Love that we really need to talk to the county commissioners. We go down there and they complain because they think our fund balance is too big, and this is one reason why we might not have to keep our fund balance so big if they would pay what they're supposed to pay, and so it's really I don't think they've ever gone in debt. I mean, I don't think they've ever had a negative fund balance, but the difference is they have the ability to issue bonds if they go into debt. We don't. So they serve as our surrogate to raise money. And for them to turn this around is just, inexcusable in my mind. I hope we can get the practice changed. And then really, as soon as they get the revenues, why don't they put them, if they get them in the first quarter of the next year, why don't they pay them? It's just an accounting correction.
Yep.
So there's really no reason for them not to pay this money, and they have less debt outstanding. They have a AA bond rating, and so what are they worried about? This is one of these things that has gone on too long, and I just hope we can get it corrected.
Absolutely.
Seeing no other lights, Superintendent, if you could just share with the board again the letter that was sent to the County Commission, Mr. Johnson, as a refresher to board members, and then I think it will ignite for board members what other further action they would like taken, and maybe we can discuss that, have some dialogue about that as a board once the superintendent sends a letter back out that was sent to them. And I do recall that was probably sometime in October or November that we made this first appeal or had this conversation in our Audit, Budget, and Finance Committee. And so obviously we have given the County Commission ample time to correct this matter, and that we just need a follow-up at this point. And I'm happy to do also a follow-up with the chair of the County Commission as well. No other questions? We're going to move on to board items. And we have 8.1, Board Member Strategic Funds, School Funds Allocation Program. I guess this would be, I'm going to pull it up, I'm sorry, since this is a board item. These are just school funds that have been allocated to a number of schools based on board member allocations. I'm going to pull up the document just so that we can see where we are for the resolution for this particular. This is in the amount of, I apologize, amount of $115,000 for Board Member Woods, and he had, I'm sorry, $9,229 for Board Member Woods, the amount of $39,750 for Board Member Orgel, and the amount of $35,669 for Board Member Avent. And those subsequent, each of those schools and the allocation amounts is listed in our board documents. Seeing no lights, we'll move on to 8.2 is a resolution recognizing Anthony Jones Jr. as an outstanding coach and educator. And this resolution, I think, was originated with Board Member Love, so I will turn that over to her.
Thank you, Chair. This is a resolution which I will read into the record next week. And so far I have every board member except, I have to get a confirmation from Board Member Jones, who will be signing on to this resolution with me. So thank you, my fellow board members.
Seeing Board Member Orgel.
I was going to ask, I want to make sure, we have wonderful technical staff. See Patrick, I don't see John back there tonight, but the, does our TV have sound on it? Because one of our great clue teachers at Grahamwood, Miss Trotz, she didn't hear me say that because I don't think she has sound texted. Says, hey, do y'all have sound on the TV? Is there, do we have a technical difficulty, by the way, on TV station C19?
Is Mr. Best back there?
So no sound? I think we do have sound, but she said we look good. She said she wouldn't have sound on her TV.
If she told you the story that she looked good, why would you believe the second half of it?
It said you look good.
Then I know she wasn't telling the truth.
I think when they don't have sound, our ratings actually go up.
Gotcha.
So we'll make sure for our business meeting that happens next week, just that
I just
there's
want to
some-
check because we would never know if something's wrong.
Absolutely, since we're not watching ourselves at the current moment. Board Member Cornell? This has to be on regarding the resolution?
Well, no, I was gonna
You're
say that
piggybacking.
we should thank the lady for telling us that we look good.
Board Member Love?
I'm sorry, this isn't on the resolution, but
Y'all just taking all kinds of
I'm
liberties.
sorry, when we acknowledge our employees. I do want to thank Dr. Ray. There has been a lot of challenges with some of our parents, and I just want to thank him for answering his phone and resolving those issues. Thank you.
All right, with no other items before this board, where 9.1, the meeting is adjourned. I never get to do that.